My name is Dylan, and I'd been married for 7 years. If I'm being brutally honest, the last 2 felt less like a partnership and more like sharing rent with someone who wore the same ring. The spark that used to live between us had thinned to a pilot light, and even that flickered. I stayed anyway, telling myself these things come back if you keep showing up, if you don't quit before the tide turns. What finally ended, it wasn't a long fight or some dramatic discovery. It was a single text from Las Vegas, 8 words and 1 photo that cleared the fog in an instant. I met Paige in my late 20s at a local networking mixer, one of those after-work events, with name tags, lukewarm appetizers, and people who say, "Let's circle back," like punctuation. We traded business cards, made polite promises, and I figured that would be the last we'd see of each other. Then a few days later, she reached out, and the thing that wasn't supposed to go anywhere began to move. Texts became calls, calls became quick lunches during work breaks, weekday lunches bled into weekend coffees, and eventually we were hanging around after hours just to stretch a conversation that neither of us wanted to end. Feelings didn't explode. They assembled, click by click. So when we crossed into dating, we didn't spend years auditioning the idea of us. We didn't hesitate either. We picked a date, signed papers, stood in front of people who mattered, and promised the ordinary and the difficult along with the sweet. The early years felt light and generous. We laughed easily, split burdens without keeping score, and kept an eye on a future we were outlining like teammates with the same playbook. We weren't wealthy, but we were stable. The floor under us felt solid, and that felt like more than enough to build on. The one thing we wanted that wouldn't meet us halfway was children. We tried, then tried again, and each month's silence did its quiet work on us in ways we didn't know how to name. Instead of leaning closer, both of us, consciously or not, leaned into work. Paige signed up for more projects. I took on more responsibility. We still slept in the same house, but our heads were parked in different neighborhoods. The drift wasn't loud. It was incremental, the kind where routine replaces warmth, where logistics eat conversations, and where you suddenly notice you haven't reached for the other person's hand in a while. By the time the calendar read year 7, the change had edges. Paige felt like a stranger with a drawer in the dresser, and I could point to nights where we spoke only in calendar invites and grocery lists. Her work travel stretched like elastic late nights multiplied. Conferences sprouted on the calendar. Networking events and team retreats appeared with a regularity I knew. From corporate life was neither common nor cheap. I still tried to swim against the current. I thought maybe the answer was to remove every friction I could control. Money, errands, the dull parts, so she'd have space left for us. So I took on more of the financial load, shouldered the bills, and ran interference on the everyday. For a short while, I thought it worked. She started getting home a bit earlier, showed up in rooms she'd been skipping, and a small, stubborn piece of me warmed to the idea that momentum could be rebuilt. Then, like a rubber band snapping back, the late nights returned. The out-of-town trips stacked up again, and any attempt on my part to talk about us got treated like I was introducing a problem that didn't exist. One evening I said we needed to talk, that it felt like we were missing each other, and we should figure out how to reconnect. She lifted her eyes and asked, flat, "What is your problem? How else do you want us to reconnect?" I didn't have a good answer for a question asked that way, and from that point, everything between us cooled another degree. What connection remained felt transactional. Conversations shrank to logistics. Where? When? Who's picking up what? If I tried to touch anything deeper, she pulled the shutters closed. I suggested a weekly date night. She said she was too busy. I proposed counseling. She rolled her eyes like I'd offered a gimmick. Even when I planned around her schedule and picked weekends, she promised we're open. I'd meet "I'm tired," "not in the mood," or a door that stayed closed until morning. Each rejection landed like a latch clicking. One by one, the doors between us shut. She started sleeping in the guest room over minor disagreements. I tried to be understanding at first, and then I stopped believing this was just stress. Intimacy doesn't evaporate. It relocates. When a person turns off every physical and emotional connection at home, you don't need to be a detective to guess they found that connection somewhere else. One Tuesday evening, she said her company was planning a team-building retreat in Las Vegas. Saturday to Friday, a full week gone. I looked at her. A whole week in Vegas for team building? I didn't want to fight. I asked what kind of retreat it was, conference or something else. I asked because companies don't shut down for days on end to do trust falls by slot machines. Her demeanor changed like a switch had been thrown. "Why do you always have to ruin everything?" she snapped. "Are you saying I'm lying? You think I'm making this up?" I kept my voice level. "I'm your husband. It isn't crazy to want to understand what you're doing and why your company thinks a week in Vegas is normal." She flared hotter and delivered the line that told me exactly where we stood. "I'm still in this marriage because I choose to be, but keep on like this, and I'll end it, and take everything from you." I sat there and listened to the woman I'd married talk like we were negotiating exit terms for a merger. Then she left that Saturday for her retreat. I knew from that blow-up she planned to be gone until Friday. The house, for the first time in a while, felt quiet in a way that wasn't menacing. I still didn't take the divorce threat seriously. She'd thrown that word around before, and nothing had come of it. I didn't realize I was measuring with the wrong ruler. On Thursday evening, the day before she was due back, I was on the couch, unwinding from work, when my phone buzzed with a message from Paige. When I opened it, everything went muted, like the room had been wrapped in cotton. The photo showed Paige beside a man I'd never seen, both smiling in front of a courthouse, looking building city seal, columns, the whole thing, and the message beneath it read, "Just married my coworker. You're pathetic, BTW, for not calling me all through this retreat." For a few seconds, I didn't know which emotion to reach for first. Betrayal, disbelief, disgust. They crowded the door at the same time. I typed one word. Cool. Then I took a screenshot in case she decided to rewrite history later, and I called the person I knew would speak to the law instead of my feelings. My friend from college, Mason, now a family lawyer who doesn't miss details. After I sent him the screenshot, he said, "Okay, don't move yet. We talk tonight. No sudden steps until we map it out." That call was the beginning of the end of my marriage. By midnight, I knew I was done, waiting for Paige to come to her senses or to remember what she'd promised. First, I froze the joint bank account linked to her card. I didn't care if she got rejected at a bar or at an airport kiosk. She could fund her new choices without me. Then I suspended every shared credit card, so the bill for this wouldn't boomerang back to my mailbox. Before bed, I booked a locksmith to come first thing Friday. The locks were changed before the coffee went cool. Friday morning, while I was at the office, Paige apparently tried to pay for something with our family card at the airport and learned the easy way that nothing worked anymore. She arrived at the house, put her key in a lock that had moved on, and found out she no longer had access to a door she'd been walking through on autopilot. Not long after, I got a call from the local police. An officer asked if I could come open the door because my wife was outside and said she couldn't get in. When I arrived, I kept it simple. I'm the sole owner on the deed. She left for a week by choice after what happened in Vegas. I don't feel safe or comfortable letting her back in without a conversation conducted through counsel. The officers were measured and professional. They looked at the deed, explained that this was a civil matter for the courts, and didn't force entry. Paige melted down on the lawn angry, loud, then pivoting to a new story. She told the officers the wedding was a joke, that they were drunk, that it's Vegas, those chapels are for entertainment. I didn't argue. I didn't need to. I told the officers my lawyer would be in touch and asked that she leave the property. And while a very small part of me wanted to believe she'd been reckless, not calculating, a larger part of me was done with guessing games, silent treatments, and manipulation by mood. Even if she had been drunk, who walks into a legal building, signs legal documents for a legal marriage, and then texts their spouse a victory lap about it? That week, I sat down with Mason and filed for divorce, irreconcilable differences, with potential infidelity flagged, and requested full separation of assets. I didn't need more than her own photo and her own words to understand which way the wind was blowing. She hired a lawyer fast. What she didn't expect was that we weren't bluffing and we weren't guessing. Mason contacted the Clark County Recorder's Office to verify whether the Vegas ceremony had made its way into an official registry. It had, under her name and the name of her coworker, Tyler. Then the worse than stupid part surfaced. Tyler was already legally married. Paige hadn't just played with a line. She stepped over into a crime with a name: bigamy. Mason reported it to the district attorney's office with the certificate, screenshots, timelines, and everything else the file needed to open. An official criminal investigation followed. In family court, I got temporary spousal financial protection, which meant she couldn't wake up one morning and raid whatever accounts were left while we argued over paperwork. The judge granted me full use of the house sensible, since my name is the only one on the deed, and issued an order freezing all joint assets so nothing could be shuffled out of sight while the case moved. That alone gave me breathing room and time for the criminal side to grind forward. The state charged Paige with bigamy. She threw every explanation she could find at it. She thought it was fake. She believed chapels in Vegas were just for show. She was too drunk to understand. The prosecution wasn't guessing. They had the signed marriage certificate, and they had a hotel receipt from that night showing a check-in under Mr. and Mrs. Her new last name, his last name, tying the bow on intent. Months crawled hearings, motions, schedules, but eventually the gavel moved. The verdict was guilty. She didn't go to jail, first offense, public humiliation, and the mess she'd made of her own life were probably counted as enough to avoid bars. But the sentence still bit. Probation, a $10,000 fine, and community service hours that don't disappear in a weekend. Felony records don't scrub out with apologies. They follow resumes like a shadow. And the consequences didn't stop at the courthouse steps. Her employer let her go fast. HR doesn't keep a convicted felon in a polished corporate role. And while they were at it, they confirmed the company doesn't run week-long retreats in Las Vegas. My side of the ledger wrapped cleanly. The court granted the divorce, no alimony, no strings, assets protected, house stays mine, and a record in the file acknowledging how her conduct shaped the outcome. In the end, her Vegas moment cost her everything she thought she could leverage: job, credibility, access to my resources, and the ability to keep playing old control games. I walked out free, with the door closed by her choices and the handle on my side. I couldn't have asked for a clearer exit if I'd written it myself. Sometimes I still try to reverse engineer the logic. Did she think I would panic, beg, plead, and forgive after a public slap like that? I don't need to know. It isn't my job to explain a story that never made sense in the first place. She handed me an exit. I took it. Doesn't get cleaner than that.